and welcome to a pretty fun sketchbook session. Today I'm pretty excited to test my new Inktense pencils and also to create a new illustration with them. I've had such a really great time using them. They are an absolutely amazing medium. I've already swatched them in my sketchbook and added some water to test all of the colors. They're so vibrant and beautiful. I thought it'd be helpful to show you how I've tested them, what techniques worked and didn't work for me, and what I really love about them. I'll also take you through step-by-step painting my illustration, so stay tuned for that towards the end too. So I bought my Inktense pencils individually so I could pick specific colors. I picked a range in the primary colors so I can mix additional colors, plus some other variants, as well as a nice dark ink black and the charcoal gray. I bought a few other green colors and some warmer earth tones, as I tend to use those more often as well. I'll list the exact colors in the description for you. So let's get started with all the fun. So I've laid down some water over the yellow pencil crayon here and let it dry. And now I just want to test the pencil crayon over it dry and see what I can get with this. And I also want to see what it looks like because they shouldn't blend together. And so I want to see what it looks like if I do this kind of in layers. That's why I started with the yellow. If I layer another color over top of this, put them in order of color here, basically like color wheel color, to see what'll happen and how it'll work. So let's activate this golden color here. I kind of like that you can see the marks underneath it, and you can optionally also, it seems, at least on this paper, this is watercolor paper, wet it enough so that you can get rid of those marks as well. So it basically just darkens that. And then here, that's a lot of water. So the color, because there's so much water and so much pigment in this actually, the yellow is showing through a little bit. It's not blending, but it is showing through. It is giving me sort of a lighter orange color there as well. One of the really nice things I like about this is that I can take some of this pigment and use it in other places as well. Like there's just so much pigment and paint with it. Like I've barely touched that and there's so much pigment in that right now. So I wanted to test doing like a line and then wetting that line. Here I'll do some different weights of this line and see what happens when I add some water along that line. When I was doing this before, it was really nice. You could just sort of like activate the Inktense just enough to get smooth gradation there with a nice kind of dark line at the edge, which seems to work pretty well. There's so much pigment in it that I just bring down the pigment. I can paint over it and still have a bit of a line under there if I want that. Or again, I can kind of get rid of the line and just have the pigment sort of wet on its own without the initial line down there. So this is a nice way to get a nice dark line with a good gradation away from that line if I want that, say for a shadow or something like that. It seems to work pretty well. For this, I really wanted to try wetting the tip of the pencil crayon. This is Willow, and I don't want to wet it too much and ruin my pencil crayon there. This gives really nice texture. I used this in my illustration actually, and it worked really well for a couple of reasons. It gave me really nice dark color in here, like the value of the color is the darkest when I used it this way with the wet tip. It also gives a nice texture. That's pretty cool. It's a nice result right there for sure. I want to try and see how I can get texture with this, and I've done this a few different ways. I can initially create a base of color, wet it, and give myself some color, like a color base. And I'm blending that in because this is a cold press watercolor paper. And I don't really want the texture of the watercolor paper here, so I want to test it this way. So then we'll let that dry. And then if I add other texture and color over top of another color, then I want to see how that blends. The green underneath has dried, but I could also leave some of the pencil marks to have a little bit of texture there if I want, or I can pick up some of the color and use it to extend and darken. That's the other thing I find is when you add the water to the Inktense pencil crayons and there's like a fine line like that, it darkens it, which is really nice. So if you want to get some darker darks, some darker values, you can do that. I think also what is nice is to sort of test different colors over top of other colors. Because they don't blend, you can kind of play with the different kinds of colors and shades that you get by putting one color over the other, because there is some transparency. So it's really interesting to see what the different colors kind of look like. This blue over top of the green. The other thing too is I make sure that if I'm trying to blend different colors, that I'm rinsing my paintbrush so I don't have residual pigment and color from something else as well. What you can't do is wash it away like you can with watercolor. I can lift the color in watercolor, but you really can't do that with Inktense, is what I'm finding as well. So you can also use other pencil crayons as, this is just a regular white Prismacolor pencil crayon as a resist. So it's kind of cool if I draw a little heart here and really color that in. And then use, let's say, the blue around it here. So I'm just coloring over top of that white heart with the blue. And the more of the pencil crayon you apply, the Inktense, or you apply to that, the more color you'll have as well. So then when I wet that, let's add a bit more water, you'll see obviously the pigment from the Inktense pencil crayon. And you can kind of see the heart there. I'm going to clean off my brush. And then if I go over this area, it allows you to basically lift it, so I can tell where I put that pencil crayon and kind of lift off the paint that's on there. Not the paint, the Inktense that's on there. So you can see it creates a pretty good resist, where, as you saw when I tried it over here, it really didn't lift off the green as well. And let's try if I were to do, let's see, I think that's just gonna give me a white line, obviously, like, because the white pencil crayon is not transparent, you can't really see the green under there. But let's say I did that with this over top. Again, I'll have that white line kind of showing up there, which is kind of cool. It's a different effect that it kind of gives you that ability to have either a resist or to lift the paint off if you know you have little spots where you might want to leave the paper. I just want to kind of make this a little bit more interesting just with that other color there. That's the darker blue that I have. And just add a couple other colors in it. Kind of cool though that works so well as well. So as you can see, I bought a pretty limited palette with all of these Inktense pencil crayons here. Basically red, yellow, and blue, the primaries, with some browns here, so that I could sort of mix and match colors that I wanted to make. And what I wanted to try, or what I've been doing, I guess, is mixing some colors. So if I want to make a purple, which I don't have here, I could do a couple of different things. I can mix this way directly on the paper, so do a red, and then I'll use this blue right here, sort of beside it, and I'm gonna just overlap it a little bit there. And then what I can do is wet that all at the same time and mix it together and sort of grab more blue or more red depending on, you know, the color of purple that I want to create. So if I want a little bit more of a red purple, I can grab more red over here. And if I want it to be a little darker, then I'll mix a little bit more of this blue in with it here and create sort of a darker, more blue purple. So that works pretty well for mixing, but you know what happens is you have this color here, you have the two different colors on your page. So what you can do is mix this on something else. I was using actually just like a thicker nail file that I had and doing this and then pulling the color and putting it on the paper. I've seen people use the Caran d'Ache palettes that have a textured surface on it. Another way to do that is by shaving off some of the pigment and mixing together on the page. You could add a little bit more yellow or lighten it, but you're not mixing it apart on a separate palette. You're mixing it directly on the page. I could add a little more pigment and keep wetting that and mixing if I wanted to as well. So that really allows you to mix the colors. So you could mix quite a wide range of different colors doing any of these types of methods with the Inktense, which is pretty nice. So one of the favorite colors that I love to use is like an indigo blue. So I'm going to use this dark blue I have here, a sea blue with the charcoal gray, and I'm going to create a nice indigo blue with those as well. So I'm going to, just like I did here, mix the two of them. I'm going to do it two different ways, so we'll test and see which we like. So we'll just sort of lay down the colors one on top of the other. Now, depending on how dark or light I want it, I could just do half of that, or, which I think I will actually just do half of that right there. And we'll just mix that around and see what kind of color we get there. So we're layering the different colors. Ooh, that's so pretty. Look at that. Oh, isn't that beautiful? So that made a really gorgeous indigo blue. And there's a lot of pigment in here. So then I can take this and spread it around and use it wherever I want to. The other way that I was doing it earlier was side by side or near each other and then blending them together on the page. And honestly, I guess depending on what you're doing in your painting, it sort of warrants, you know, using one or the other method depending. Now here it's kind of nice because I'm blending from this sea blue into this darker charcoal color, which is pretty cool. That's kind of a nice way to get a gradient like that as well. And I can lift the paint from either side and move the gradient back and forth. So that's pretty nice. What I also want to do here is to create a gradient from a color to just the white paper. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to pre-wet the surface. And so you can see I have a block there that's fully wet. And then I'm going to take this color right here and I'm going to just apply the color just above where it's wet there. And I can draw into, we'll do that after. Let's just do it right now so you can see. You can also draw into the wet, which is pretty cool. It gives you a nice effect. So I could leave that as mark making or different marks on a drawing if I wanted to. What I wanted to do is just get the pigment up here, basically as I would use it in a palette, so a place where I can pull the pigment from. I'm going to wet the pigment with a fairly wet brush, and then I'm just going to draw that pigment down along this whole area where I applied the Inktense pencil crayon onto the wet paper. You can still see the marks in there, so that's something to take note of. Now, I've just rinsed my brush off, so it's clean right now. And as I'm working down to get that really nice gradient, and here you can see I've just worked it down to go all the way down really nice and smoothly into white. And isn't that cool? I love this effect right here. That's really nice, actually. So when you draw into the wet pigment, you're going to end up with a color that, or with lines that do not necessarily come out. And look how nice that is there. So one thing I noticed when I was doing my drawing was that the red, if I applied it into the wet, oh, it just gave me such nice rich color. It was really, really great. So here I've done that as well. Let's wet over top of all of this. So this is pigment we've already laid down. Now let's try a darker color over that in the wet paint and see. So maybe we use it for a grass effect, or who knows what use you would have for this, or I would have. I did use it in my initial drawing as well a little bit in a few of the different spots, just to give, again, a little bit of a darker pigment in there. So it's going to change some of the color of the green just because it's going to pick up some of that paint and blend it, but it's also leaving those marks underneath as well. So let's turn that green into a little bit richer green, more of a blue green, and then left some of the marks under there as well. So much you can do with Inktense, really. It's very interesting. I think if I wanted to do something really detailed, I would use them more as a paint like this, and, you know, use it to get these little kind of fine marks and things where I want to get it. And I did do a little bit of that. So here I can do that. I can, you know, I can get like as thin of a mark as I want, just like watercolor, by doing that. I'm just amazed at the pigment in this. So they are, I think the base for these is ink, hence the name Inktense. And so they're so vibrant. It's really cool. So I could and did use it this way as well. So I'll have to keep playing with it and see what I think and apply it in different ways. But let's move on to the illustration that I did with all of this. I was really excited to use my Inktense pencils to create a new illustration. and chose to redraw this little mouse character from a quick sketch I had done before. I started by laying down the initial base colors that I wanted to use with the Inktense pencils. I used most, if not all, of the colors that I had, but especially the variety of greens that I bought. Where I want more color, I'm laying down more pigment, and where I want less color, I'm pressing lighter with the pencils. As I'm adding the water with my brush, I'm specifically allowing the water to pool with the pigment to help create darker areas or shadows. I'm also wetting the areas that I want to be darkest first, and I'm careful to clean off my brush as I switch between the different colors. Now that I've wet all of the Inktense, I'm coming back in with the pencils to add more pigment, darken areas, increase the values, and add more color variation. In between, I'll wet and blend these areas to create more contrast and details. I'm using the paper, pencil, and the brush to create some fur texture and add more details. And I'm also adding additional colors to blend over dried colors to create highlights and more depth in the shadows. I've added more red and yellow pigment to the berries so that I can wet it and intensify the color a bit more. I'm also doing the same with the mushroom, adding more pencil to the wet paper to darken the color. I'm continuing to build the layers to create more colors, add detail with the pencils and tip of the brush, and use more of the techniques that I spoke about earlier. And here's our finished little friend. I'm pretty happy with how this illustration turned out and how the Inktense pencils performed. They're a lot of fun to use and a very fast medium to create with. If you'd like a PDF of my sketchbook spread with the Inktense colors that I used, swatch tests, technique testing, description of those techniques, and this little mouse illustration, then head on over to my Patreon where you can get access to it there. So I hope that this video was helpful and enjoyable. I really appreciate you being here with me. Thanks again for keeping me company and have a wonderful day.